Dr. Amit Goswami, welcome to Bendiksen Airways.
Glad to be with you.
How is life in Brazil?
Great. Always like Brazil.
Nice. I came across you and your work through reading the book The Self-Aware Universe. So I was thinking we could speak a bit about that and your theories, but before that, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, not by, I shall introduce myself with three words: quantum physicist, consciousness researcher, and quantum activist.
All right.
And of course, I have written books and I have been teaching a whole lot, both about quantum physics and its applications to the social arena, psychology especially, and medicine, but even business. So we are finding that the lessons of quantum physics, when applied to our society, can really give us some real answers, in contrast to the existing philosophies which are only creating problems.
Exactly. So, what led you as a theoretical quantum physicist to explore consciousness and spirituality in such depth?
Well, a distinct event did happen. I was very unhappy with my work because more and more it was becoming very routine and boring. And my family life also was not compatible with the kind of hard work, 16 hours a day kind of life that I was living. So I was invited at this conference, and after my talk, I was not pleased with it. And then when the next speaker spoke, I thought he gave a much better talk, and people received it much better, and I became jealous. And strangely, that jealousy energy lasted the whole day. It wouldn't even go away in the evening when I was at a party, and my jealousy was that the women are paying more attention to other men than me, although I was married and was not really interested in another woman. Anyway, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I find that all my antacids are gone. So I panicked a little. I thought maybe I should go outside, and the room was full of smoke. Of course, in those days, people smoked. So the outside air did help, and I relaxed for a second. And in that moment, a thought came completely unexpectedly. Why do I live this way? And it was answered immediately that I don't have to. I can integrate my life and the way I make my livelihood. That was the beginning of everything. All the changes I made subsequently.
So, going from that moment to your, let's say, theory about why things are as they are, how did that journey go?
Well, that happened because, my first implication was to change from my old field to gravitation theory, which is also very exciting because black holes and stuff. But that didn't match. And somehow I was led to a question of quantum physics that people think is the dead end because nobody can solve that problem, was the more or less the feeling that people had. And that's the problem of how quantum objects, which are waves, become particles when we measure them. That question is called quantum measurement problem. So I became interested in that, and it took me a long time, but eventually I solved it. And that was what was reported in Self-Aware Universe.
How has that theory developed over the years?
Yes, then the theory has developed. First, it just was the ontology with metaphysics under which science must be done. Consciousness is the ground of being, and quantum objects are possibilities for consciousness to choose from. This was the beginning. And then from that, developed a theory of experiences. We have experiences of not only thinking, not only sensing, but we also have feeling, we also have intuition, we also have experience of the self. And these last three things are a no-no for most scientists. They don't even bother. They don't say feelings.
Why is that?
Because it's very hard to fit material description. Or regular scientists, most of them are believers of scientific materialism. Matter is everything. In material, if matter is whole of existence, then feelings are impossible to fit in. Mind you can fit in at least through computer and computation. That is a great discovery. And mental thinking is like computing, rational thinking is step by step, algorithmic. And so some things fit in. But as far as feeling is concerned, nothing is there in the computer or any form of matter that has anything that can resemble what a feeling is. Feeling is where we experience it ourselves. The self, comes in a major way. It cannot be done in a non-subjective way. Feeling is always subjective. So this is the problem with dealing with feeling. And the intuition, of course, is not sensory experience. It's extrasensory experience. And extrasensory experience is out of the question for scientific materialists. And self, of course, is a huge problem. They do worry about the self because self-experience cannot be denied completely, but they try to make the self-experience as objective as they can in order to fit the computer model. But of course, the self is not like that. Self can be expanded. For some people, self is very expanded. For some people, self is extremely constricted. So all these things were open problems for me to solve. And over the years, that's what I did. I solved all these problems.
Do you think we are heading towards a paradigm shift, or are we still stuck?
I think that we must have a paradigm shift. It is very clear that computer models cannot treat consciousness in the right way. It is very clear now, and more scientists are agreeing that yes, consciousness is a real problem. But just agreeing that there is a real problem to coming to the fact that quantum physics gives the solution, there is a problem there. The problem is the solution of quantum physics sounds very much like what the spiritual traditions have been telling us for thousands of years. And scientists absolutely hate the word spirituality or religion. They are completely against it. So, and of course, that is the major accomplishment, really, because we are spiritual beings. And I am very glad that my work has been instrumental in integrating science and spirituality. But this view antagonizes majority of scientists. And this is the problem with the paradigm shift. Nevertheless, a new generation is coming, and more people are being interested in what quantum physics has to say, are being interested into integration of science and spirituality. So eventually, give it 10 years or give it 100 years, but eventually paradigm will shift.
How do you define consciousness?
Consciousness is the experience in which we see ourselves separate from our environment. We see ourselves separate from others. We see ourselves separate from natural objects. And this subject-object split, that I see the world separate from me, this subject-object split defines consciousness. Before the subject-object split, it is unconscious. Existence is unconscious. But after subject-object split, we become conscious.
Do you think everything has consciousness?
Another way of distinguishing it is you use the word awareness for consciousness and reserve the word consciousness for unconscious. But that will never catch because language has too much established that we have to live with this slight ambiguity.
Mm. Do you think the fabric of reality is consciousness?
Yeah. Fabric of reality is consciousness. Consciousness is the ground of being in which objects exist as quantum possibilities for consciousness to choose from.
Interesting. And then based on that, I guess you think that we create our own reality. We have free will. We can create the life we want.
Yeah, this sentence, we create our own reality, create a lot of confusion because we don't create our own reality in our ordinary ego consciousness. When we say we create our reality, most people think that I just think of something and that will become real. Like I think, let an elephant come into the room and immediately the elephant will appear. No, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. We do not create reality in our ego consciousness. Ego consciousness is a conditioned consciousness in which our choices become limited to a very small spectrum, whereas real consciousness has complete freedom of choice. It can really choose anything. It chooses to choose within certain laws. This is why we have science. Within those scientific laws, consciousness chooses.
How do we free ourselves from the ego?
Well, the first step is to say no to conditioning. This has been experimentally verified. Initially, people make, philosophers often make the gesture of how to prove free will. I have free will because I can free will and raise my hand immediately. I can freely raise my hand. This was the idea. And then scientists discovered that if the person is wired with electrodes connected to a machine, then the machine reacts full 900 milliseconds before the raising of the hand occurs.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, they concluded what kind of free will is that which can be predicted. So people for a while, for about 10 years, started saying that no such thing as free will. But then a scientist named Benjamin Libet, he came around and he and his collaborators did an experiment in which they said, okay, it is true that there is a event-related potential. There is indeed something in a machine that can give away that you're freewheeling. But after you have thought of freewheeling, the freewheeling doesn't happen until about another 200 milliseconds. Then he instructed his subjects, try to see if you can stop raising your hand after you have will to raise your hand. So indeed, people follow his instructions, and they had the thought of raising their hand, but they registered themselves successfully. No raising, the actual raising of hand took place. So the conclusion of this, we can say no to our conditioning. Yes, free will is a conditioned action for which it is possible to predict, but we can say no to our conditioned actions, which proves our free will.
What kind of suggestions do you have for people who want to, let's say, become aware of who they are and try to live a more purposeful life?
Yeah, they can say to no to trivial pursuit, and they can follow the purposeful life. The first step is saying no to trivial pursuit, and that's not easy. That reconditioning is the difficult part. But once reconditioning happens, naturally, we are attracted towards meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And this is why some people say it is our nature to be good. But the problem is that it's all in potentiality. The potentiality is all covered up by the problems that we carry. Me-centeredness, negative emotions, pleasure-centeredness, tendency of trivial pursuit. These are the obstructions to that adventure into potentiality.
What role does meditation have?
What does meditation do?
What role do you think meditation has in this?
Okay, meditation plays a very great role. The reason is this. Between the present, look, let me go back a little. This ego self is not our real self. Our real self is at the present moment, before that 500 milliseconds before this takes place, the real self, the present moment. And that real self, which we call quantum self, between the quantum self and the ego self, there is this 500 millisecond time difference. Meditation enables us to enter that time by reducing the reaction time. For ordinary people, reaction time is 500 milliseconds. If you meditate for a while, that reaction time will decrease to 400, 300, even less than 200 milliseconds. So meditation has this effect. This domain, Freud called pre-conscious, where a lot of editing of what we consciously experience at the ego level takes place. Now, if we enter in that region, in that pre-conscious domain, then of course our experience will change. Our conscious will seem more expanded, more inclusive. We are able to love, we are able to give people, we are able to be good to people, we are capable of positivity. So all those negative things that I was talking about, negative characteristics that we suffer from, simply can disappear if we learn how to go meditate at deeper and deeper level. Now, there are levels of meditation. The reason is that it's not a continuous process. Meditation can lead to discontinuous processes. We call them quantum leaps. And this continuous process changes the level at which we exist. And the spectrum of consciousness is a real thing. It was first suggested by Ken Wilber, the great philosopher, but now I have scientized it by using quantum physics. It really is through quantum leaps we develop different levels of happiness, different levels of intelligence, all depending on how much in that expanded consciousness do we live.
Interesting. What can you say about these Eastern traditions, like you spoke about earlier? What have they said for centuries or thousands of years that align with this?
That alignment? Did you say alignment?
That aligns with quantum physics.
The Eastern tradition just says that consciousness is the ground of being. Mm-hmm. It's a oneness, and we are all underneath our separateness one. But then they could not really explain how that oneness becomes separate into a subject and object and into individual. They had some tentative ideas, but those ideas are not quite scientific. What quantum science does, and what my work has done, is to show that all these ideas can be made scientific. And we have given the scientific explanation of how the separateness occurs, how the individuality occurs, all of that stuff.
And how do you propose we go about to make this paradigm shift happen faster? How do we go about making a better world and teach our children in a way that promotes this view?
This is a really, really good question, and also very speculative question, because this is something we are trying to propose for the future. And as you know, proposing anything for the future is a speculation. That's all we can do. But I have very reason to speculate the way I speculate. It is a fact, anthropologists have recently found that human beings learn to self-domesticate themselves, roughly completing the job about 70,000 years ago. They learned to self-domesticate, and since then, we are much milder than wild animals. In other words, we stopped being animals that very day when about 70,000 years ago, when we learned to domesticate ourselves. We are not so violent anymore as wild animals. But of course, we are not domesticated animals either. We have better capacity. We have mind. We have intuitive capacity. So with that intuitive capacity and with the mind, we improved on that power of self-domestication. And one of the improvements that happen is altruism. When we see another person in distress, a natural tendency comes in us to help the person. Altruism. However, altruism had only 70,000 years to develop, and it's not complete. Right now, people estimate that only about 40% of people are altruistic, instinctually altruistic. The rest of us, especially 40%, are definitely not instinctually altruistic, and the rest 20% are sort of mixed somewhere in there. So this is the problem of any quick changes that to take place. How to go from here to there is really the problem is that some people don't even have the notion of altruism. They're not violent like animals, but they're not very different either. They don't even have the concept of the other who needs help. As you can see, more and more politicians that are openly subjecting themselves to cruelty. In the 20th century, some progress was made between the 60s and 70s and 80s, where we felt that cruelty is forever eliminated. But look at the behavior of Israelis over Palestine. Look at the behavior of Russians over Ukrainians. You see absolutely raw cruelty coming back again in humanity. And this is all because, in my opinion, all because these people are not altruistic. They cannot help another person in distress. They don't have the concept of this person is another person. This person is another person, same as me. Just as I have wants, just as I want to be happy, same thing that person wants. This is beyond their perception. They really think that they are superior people and all they are killing are inferior people, and therefore killing is okay. So with this kind of mindset, to change from that to loving everybody, which is in our potentiality, as an instinct, self-domestication took about 200,000 years. We had only 70,000 years, so we have 130,000 years to go to have it as an instinct. So it cannot happen as an instinct very quickly. Obviously, global warming will destroy us all very much quicker than that. So what's the answer? The answer is also in human history. It is true that humans generally declined from a region of time, a domain of time that happened between that 70,000 and historical time, 12,000 years. Some really good stuff took place. We built things, we found beauty, we made peace with the Neanderthals, we did not kill them off completely. Neanderthal genes are mixed in the human genes, which means that human beings did not really kill off the another human race. We built even pyramids. Newest data shows that 27,000 years ago we built pyramids. Can you believe? Pyramids are spiritual structures. So 27,000 years ago, people are thinking of spiritual ideas that we call archetypes today. So there was a very high level of reality in which we lived at that time. However, rational thinking was still lacking. When agriculture was discovered, we went into rational thinking era, and things changed again. So ever since, we have been kind of declining in civilization. But even so, the interesting thing is that there are occasional gaps in this continuous story of decline of civilization. Occasionally, in India, in the reign of Ashoka and Mauryas, in Roman Empire, the famous Pars Romana, that started with the first Caesar, in fact. Then later on, we have Pericles in Greece. That's not later on, that may be also earlier on. Okay, that's probably, I don't remember the date. And many other instances of peaceful regions of the earth. But the earth was smaller then, because regions were not connected by internet or anything even close. Even trains and airplanes did not exist. So now the earth is very big, and those changes were brought about by leaders who were truly special people, truly connected with reality, what Eastern traditions call enlightenment. They were enlightened people. The emperors who did these peaceful empires, large regions of the earth where no battle, no skirmishes took place between people, except, of course, family battles and stuff like that. But that really did happen. So who are these people? In India, we call them Avatara. So my content is that in the future, now that we have huge communication facility available in the form of the internet, in the future, we can make communities which will build avatars within them, which will produce, cultivate avatars in their society. And these avatars will lead others through their example. This is where quantum activism comes in. Quantum activists not only change others, but they try to change themselves while they change others. So these avatars act like they tell you to change, but through their example. They are not telling you to change without illustrating what change is like. So people can be on the path to change. So all that it takes to shift paradigm and change society is people realize that meaning and purpose is the real objective of life and not trivial pursuit, not negative emotions, not me-centeredness, not pleasure-seeking. As soon as that happens, world can change. How long will that take? There I am helpless because I cannot really say. Depends on so many things. Right now, if you look at the world, it feels very pessimistic because, Donald Trump and America and what is going on there, things really does look very hopeless, especially with the war in Ukraine never stopping, Putin being who he is, Israel being who they are, and so on and so forth. I could mention many other countries. I'm just concentrating on these three because these are the most prominent places where wisdom is lacking. But it can change. It can change by changing ourselves, and for that we need transformation. So, my collaborator, Valentina Onisar, and I have established universities, Quantum Activism Vishalayam. This university, along with the University of Technology Jaipur, which is an government-affiliated university, we are giving degrees, master's and PhD for a transformative education program. So we already have started this, growing avatars in the academic institution. Let's see where we can go. If we can produce 10, 15, 20, or 50, or 30, or 100, whatever number it is, that will spread. Many more institutions like this will grow, and very soon many more avatars will come into being. When that happens, the future can be very different very quickly.
Exciting. Do you think society is ready to embrace a worldview that includes both science and spirituality?
I think that it must eventually, because science has two compartments. It's not only theory; it also has verification. And fortunately, the experimental scientists, because they are not so much inclined towards theory, they are kind of impartial. They are not as prejudiced about theory as theorists become. So my hope is that neuroscientists, they are one of the future creators, just like quantum physicists. Quantum physics and neuroscience together are the future. Neuroscientists are discovering, in fact, they are the ones who discovered, did the definitive experiment which showed that computers can never be the solution of consciousness. Computer models cannot solve the consciousness problem.
So you are not so you are not at all worried about artificial general intelligence?
No, no, because look, artificial intelligence is based on the known, and the human power, whole human thinking power, comes from the unknown, intuition. So unless the mental, rational mind, yes, the artificial intelligence does certainly duplicate the rational mind. Whatever the rational mind can do based on the known, artificial intelligence can do better someday. Today it doesn't do so much better, but day by day their ability of doing better is improving. So eventually I think they will beat the rational mind in terms of the scope of the solution, problem solution ability that they have. But intuitive thinking is something completely different. Intuitive thinking gives us new ideas. And this new is outside of the domain of computers. Computers can never process the new. However big the database you make, the database is always based on what is known, what is already in our domain of the known. But intuition leads us to these unknowns, which we call archetypes. The ideas that comes from ancient people's thinking was that these are the ideas that are aspects of God, characteristics of God, God's qualities. Today we don't go that far, but we say these are the qualities that if we explore and embody them, we become enlightened of consciousness. We fully acquire the qualities that consciousness is capable of.
Where does that intuition come from?
Intuition comes directly from consciousness without using sensory signal. So they are ESP, extrasensory signals. Extrasensory signals from consciousness directly, direct communication from consciousness.
And what changes would you like to see in schools and universities with regards to teaching science?
I think the real change that needs to be made, and the evidence is already sufficiently there, is to give up on scientific materialism. As soon as science becomes free again, science has become prejudiced. Science has become dogmatic. This is a dogma. That everything is matter is a dogma. There is no scientific proof of it because it cannot be proven. How can you prove something that is the world is made of when there is so many things that it cannot explain? So this is a dogma. This dogma has to be given up. Unfortunately, we have gotten into a situation where people don't even talk about worldviews anymore in academia. And so the academia has more or less accepted this dogma thoroughly. For them, the problem of worldview is solved. It is the scientific materialism and nothing else. So long that mindset has to change. And to change that mindset, there is a saying that old paradigms never change, but they do die. So the hope is that eventually this old paradigms will pass away and the new people will have no difficulty in accepting the new quantum paradigm. But that may take, as I said, 10 years or 100 years, nobody can tell.
You
You never
spoke about,
forget never forget that Copernicus discovery of solar system and between Newtonian physics, the fully 200 years passed.
yeah,
200 years it took to change the paradigm from the old paradigm to new paradigm. So why should this one be different? The paradigm shift started only with my publication of Self-Aware Universe, which was 1993. So it has been only been just about 3 decades. Too early to panic about paradigm shift. Why is it not coming?
yeah. You spoke about finding meaning and purpose. How does one go about doing that? I said you spoke about meaning and purpose, but how does a person go about finding that?
Okay. Here we have been very fortunate. Of course, the world is made of consciousness. Consciousness must make the world in such a way that people do find the potentialities eventually. So it's not a surprise that we have two natural periods in our life. When we naturally, by the rule of science, the ideas comes to us. One is the teenage, roughly starting about 13, 14, 15, 16, around that age. People get this idea that meaning and purpose is important. Now, interestingly, academics have some idea of this because remember that is the time when majority of universities, majority of school systems send their students to high school at about age 14, and at that time they send them to counselors, and the counselors will counsel them what career would they like. Now this has become a career counseling, but it was not like that. The intuition that something needs to be done about this idea of what they want to do in the future actually came from the intuition that comes into all children around that age, that there is something that they should do that will bring their life satisfactory, that will make their life satisfactory, and that is meaning and purpose. So, of course, career covers some aspects of meaning and purpose, so it's not entirely meaningless. But if we could be more direct, that look, give up the trivial pursuit and get into meaning and purpose, and much more definitive about the importance of meaning and purpose, it would be so much better. Career counseling just doesn't do it because, people can readily see that making money may not be the only thing for them. People may have other inclinations. And if making money is the only thing, why not sell drugs? These are natural confusion that people will have. So talking directly about meaning and purpose, which went away from the academics, this has been a major, major loss. You have to bring that back again. So that's one time that it comes. Fortunately, even though we miss it in the academy, fortunately, at about middle age, starting about age 40 to, let's say, about age 60, many people naturally hear that call from consciousness once again. Again, the question of meaning and purpose comes in. That's how I came into meaning and purpose. And many people like me I meet, which has, when I give workshops, most participants are middle-aged. So the meaning and purpose, that voice comes, and some people, of course, there are two responses to it. Do I get into meaning and purpose? Am I not too old? The other response is that, okay, nothing needs to be done. My life is not really so bad. I can manage. So indeed, we find empirically these two categories of people. Some people go back and reconstruct their life not to be so bad, and some people go on and start a new life. And more and more people are starting a new life in their midlife transition. So this suggests that maybe the paradigm shift will happen sooner than we think, because the number of middle-aged people who are looking for meaning and purpose is really quite large. If you look at it, David Hawking, a great psychologist, he estimated that maybe about 15% of people today are looking for meaning and purpose.
Sounds familiar. What advice would you give to young people who are into science but feel a pull towards existential or spiritual questions?
Yeah, and unfortunately, most of the people who come to science today opt for either engineering or computer science or bioengineering. They don't opt for the pure, more philosophical aspects like physics. And physics is no longer the popular subject in academia anymore. And this is unfortunate that the more and more students go into computer science, where they get trained into scientific materialism and become firmly entrenched in that philosophy. Engineers, likewise. Bioengineers, likewise. So this is a great difficulty. So I would start at the high school level and try to get people who are going to be scientists that look, science is not like it is being proposed. Science really is natural philosophy as it was once called. And philosophy is part of science, and you don't have to be really mathematical in order to do physics, because physics, in terms of quantum physics, can be applied to social sciences like psychology, and you don't need any mathematics. People don't go into physics because of fear of math. But this fear of math is completely uncalled for, because physics as it is almost all finished. There are all practical problems left. But physics, which is coming, the new physics, this new physics is philosophical. There is no mathematics for quantum measurement theory. And therefore, people can get into the new physics, the new quantum science, as we call it, without having any fear of mathematics, and they can go into the psychological problem, they can solve sociological problem, how to make a better society, they can go to anthropological problem. So many problems to solve in the way of new physics.
I want to ask you what you think happens after we die.
This is another controversial question. I am convinced, quantum physics tells me, and experimental data is supporting, that we reincarnate. After death, we do not end, we reincarnate in another body.
What kind of data supports this?
Well, the data mainly is past life recall. Many children, have a different kind of self-awareness than we have. We are more or less entrenched in the ego, but children has a lot of quantum self-experience, and therefore they are very open in their perceptions and their experiences. And some of these experiences are something that comes from past life, and they, of course, clearly cannot quite distinguish them. They're confused about it. But researchers have studied them, especially a researcher named Ian Stevenson, a great psychologist, psychotherapist from University of Virginia. He studied many kids, initially from India and Sri Lanka, but later also from the West, and found that many of these past life memories can be verified. In other words, he went with the kid to what they were remembering, went to that village and verified, yes, there really such a house, there really are such people that these people remembered, and so forth. So that's the main evidence. But there are many other evidence. I have to refer you to the book Physics of the Soul that I wrote in 2001 to get more information. But as I said, it's a whole book of data available. And the theory is also very simple. Theory is that we not only have local memory that are registered in the brain, but we also have non-local memory that exists outside of the brain, outside of space and time. And this non-local memory has no limit of space and time. My non-local memory can easily be lived by another person in the future. And then couldn't that person could be called my reincarnation? Because who am I but the stuff that I have learned, that I have capacities for? The money that I make, that obviously disappears after I die. The job that I have obviously disappears after I die. The funds that I grow, the trees that I grow, the house that I build, everything disappears after I die. They're not mine anymore. But one thing that cannot disappear is what I learn, what I can be. The Amit that I am is defined by the Amit that is speaking to you, this ability that I have, this conceptualizations, this integration of science and spirituality, this learning that has happened in me, this part goes with me. So next time when I am born, I will have much more awareness of the integration of science and spirituality than this time when I started. That's the idea.
Last question. What is the meaning of life?
Okay, and in very, very briefly, look, you can write a whole book about what is the meaning of life. But quantum science is very clearly telling us that meaning of life is to accept the fact that life has purpose, and this purpose is to explore and embody the archetypes, those values, the spiritual values, the stuff that take us towards oneness, the exploration of which takes us to oneness. That's the goal of life. That's the meaning of life.
Amit, I would like to thank you for the conversation. I enjoyed it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Tusen takk for at du hørte på Bendiksen Airways. Dersom du har tips, kommentarer eller vil gi en vurdering av episoden, så gjør gjerne det. Det setter jeg stor pris på.